Welcome. Wherever you are, whatever your day has held, I invite you now to settle in. Allow your body to soften, your breath to slow, and your mind to gently drift into another time. Tonight, we journey into the final hours of a man whose name echoes through the corridors of history, Abraham Lincoln. But this will not be a tale of political drama or gunfire in a theater. No. This is a gentler telling. A quieter story. The rhythm of that day, the texture of the world around him, the people who shared his final conversations, and the silent weight of history that crept unnoticed through the streets of Washington, D.C. As always, our story will unfold in 4 parts, beginning with the simple details of daily life in the American capital at the close of the Civil War, before we drift deeper into Lincoln's personal moments, cultural echoes, and the contrasts of the world he left behind. Let the flicker of candlelight in your imagination guide you. Let your thoughts meander like a slow river, through shadowed parlors and quiet streets. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I am super curious where you're all listening from. So, drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Now, close your eyes, if you wish. Take one more breath. And imagine yourself in Washington City. The date is April 14, 1865. Good Friday. Let yourself settle. Feel your breath slow, and imagine, just for a while, that you are walking through another time. The light is softer here. The world moves more slowly. Each step on the cobbled street carries with it the weight of quieter days, and the murmur of lives being lived. It is the morning of Friday, April 14, 1865. The war is ending, though the scars of it remain on every street, in every heart, and behind every shuttered window. But today, the sky is a gentle shade of spring blue, and Washington, D.C., hums with the restrained hope of a weary city. As dawn seeps in through the narrow alleys and climbs the stately columns of the government buildings, the first stirrings of life begin. In boarding houses, the sound of wash basins being filled echoes faintly, as maids and matrons begin their morning rituals. The water is cold, drawn from pumps or fetched from backyard wells. A splash here. A sigh there. The day has begun. In the lower quarters near F Street and 7th, children tug on boots worn at the toes, while their mothers prepare thick cornmeal cakes or porridge cooked in cast iron over wood-burning stoves. The smell of smoke mingles with the scent of bacon grease and yesterday's ash. Outside, the uneven rhythm of wooden carts and hoofbeats begins to fill the air. There are bells ringing too. Church bells in the distance, low and slow, calling out the hour. And handbells from newspaper boys, their arms waving headlines, though today, the news is quieter. No great battles. Just the continued coverage of Appomattox, and questions about what peace will look like now. On Pennsylvania Avenue, the heart of the city pulses to a different rhythm. Government clerks arrive early at the Treasury building, ascending its grand marble steps. Some tip their hats to one another. Others walk with tired purpose, briefcases under arms, the shuffle of documents awaiting them within. Nearby, the unfinished dome of the Capitol building, still bearing the scaffolding of war-era construction, stands half proud, half weary. Soldiers are stationed nearby, not with urgency, but out of habit, vestiges of the long years of war. And on a gently rising hill just to the northwest, beyond a patchwork of fences, gardens, and worn paving stones, sits the executive mansion, what we now know as the White House. It is quieter than one might expect. A place of state, yes, but also a home. Its windows reflect the softening morning, and behind them, the final day in the life of President Abraham Lincoln begins to unfold. The White House in 1865 was not the gleaming residence we picture today. It was drafty in winter and humid in summer, with faded rugs, mismatched chairs, and creaking floorboards. The grounds were pleasant but not lavish, gardens arranged with more practicality than grandeur. Still, there is a quiet dignity here. In the president's office, the fireplace has gone cold, but the air holds a faint scent of last night's smoke. On his desk are several worn books, inkpots half full, and documents awaiting review. One corner of the room contains a tall cabinet, its shelves filled with speeches, letters, and reports. Some are marked in Lincoln's own hand, leaning script, thoughtful and uneven. By now, Lincoln has risen. He was never a late sleeper. He dresses plainly, dark trousers, a black frock coat, a stiff collar. He prefers comfort over formality, though others often remind him that his position demands both. Still, he is the president, and there is something about his tall frame, slightly stooped, that makes even the simplest attire seem deliberate. At breakfast, he sits with Mary, and possibly with Tad, their youngest son, rambunctious and full of questions. The meal is modest: eggs, bread, coffee. Lincoln is quiet, as always in the early hours. He reads a paper as he eats, pausing now and then to chuckle at a line or frown thoughtfully. The mood is light, though still wrapped in shadows. They have known such deep sorrow. They lost Willie, their son, just 3 years before. And though the nation celebrates the war's end, the Lincolns know that grief does not keep to the same timelines as armies and politics. As the morning stretches forward, so too does the city's pulse. Down near the Potomac River, longshoremen unload crates from riverboats. The air smells of fish, tar, and damp timber. The water reflects the sun in small, trembling diamonds. Horses pull wagons to and from the docks, leaving deep tracks in the still muddy roads. In Georgetown, a town still technically separate from Washington, market stalls open with the soft creak of awnings and the clatter of baskets. Women in bonnets inspect cabbages, potatoes, and bolts of fabric. The butchers sharpen their knives, though this city has seen enough blood in the past 4 years to dull anyone's appetite. Children dart between stalls, chasing one another, clutching pennies for licorice or small cakes. A few wear Union Army caps, passed down from older brothers. A few have no shoes. And in the quiet neighborhoods around 13th and N Street, where free black families have begun to build fragile lives after emancipation, the day begins with a different kind of hope. There is washing to be done. Letters to send. Some have received word that their relatives, once enslaved, now freed, may be coming north to join them. Others still wait. Church choirs practice hymns behind shuttered doors. Mothers sweep stoops clean with old straw brooms. There is dignity here. There is endurance. And while Lincoln's life and legacy may feel distant to many, there is a quiet knowledge that his actions helped shape this new morning, for better or worse, with all its imperfections. Back at the executive mansion, the rhythm of the day picks up slightly, though still with the measured pace of a man who has seen too much too fast. Lincoln meets with his cabinet. They discuss post-war reconstruction and the reintegration of the southern states. The room is filled with tall-backed chairs, maps on the walls, and the soft scratching of pens. Some cabinet members speak of punishment. Others speak of unity. Lincoln listens. When he speaks, it is slowly, without flourish, but with gravity. He speaks not of vengeance, but of reconciliation. Of a nation not broken in two, but mended, though the stitches are raw. He quotes scripture, softly. And then, smiling faintly, he tells them of a dream. One he's had many times, of drifting, silently, across a dark sea toward an unknown shore. The others are used to this, his quiet mysticism. They do not mock him. Nor do they understand him fully. The meeting ends. The papers are signed. Outside, the sunlight sharpens just slightly, and spring birds trill from the few surviving cherry trees around the lawn. After the cabinet disperses, Lincoln receives more visitors. Schuyler Colfax, the Speaker of the House, stops by to discuss Western expansion. Lincoln speaks fondly of California. He longs to see the Pacific, the tall trees, the distant horizon. It's a simple wish, but one that feels almost childlike in its purity. He greets Robert, his son, just returned from war. Their meeting is brief, but warm. Lincoln is proud of him. He does not say much. But Robert knows. There are papers still to sign. Requests for pardons. Letters from families seeking answers. Lists of soldiers unaccounted for. Lincoln sifts through them, quietly, without rush. He pauses often. Sometimes to consider. Sometimes to remember. Later, in the mid-afternoon hush, he steps outside. The air is cool and damp with the ghost of rain. Mary walks beside him. They speak little. But she smiles at him, and he at her. The war, they both know, is ending. But the wounds of it will take longer. Elsewhere in Washington, preparations for the evening's play are underway. At Ford's Theater, the stage manager shouts directions in a clipped voice. Costumes are brushed clean. Lines are rehearsed. The play, Our American Cousin, has been performed dozens of times before. The jokes are familiar. But tonight, there will be distinguished guests. Carpenters check the supports of the presidential box. Red, white, and blue bunting is hung with care. A chair, larger than the others, more ornate, is positioned front and center. The program will read simply, the president will attend. On the streets, the talk turns toward the event. People discuss whether they might catch a glimpse of the president. Some speak in admiration. Others with indifference. But all agree, this night feels different. The light fades to amber. Lamplighters make their rounds. Horses are groomed for carriages. Hats are brushed. Gloves buttoned. The city prepares, as if for a pageant or the end of a season. And in the White House, Lincoln dresses slowly for the theater. He is tired, but lighter than he has been in years. Mary watches him with affection. She speaks of the play, of the crowd, of a future less heavy. He nods. As they descend the stairs and step into the waiting carriage, the city exhales. No one knows, of course, what lies ahead. But for a moment, just a moment, everything is still. The horses' hooves clatter gently over the stones. The theater awaits. The people wait. And the night unfolds in softness. Settle in again. Let the air around you become still. Let the soft rhythm of the past draw you back, slowly, gently, like the lapping of water against a quiet riverbank. The figure we remember as Abraham Lincoln did not emerge from marble or myth. He came from silence, from woods and windswept fields, from loss and hard-won knowledge, from the deep and often lonely ache of human striving. Before the president, before the war, there was simply a boy. He was born in a one-room cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky on February 12, 1809. The air was cool that winter, and the world into which he arrived was rough and uncertain. His parents, Thomas and Nancy Lincoln, were frontier people, resilient, humble, and devout. Theirs was not a world of abundance. It was a world of survival. Imagine, if you will, a cabin made of rough-hewn logs. A dirt floor. A flickering hearth. Beyond it, a wild country, untamed, deeply wooded, and filled with the unfamiliar cries of birds and beasts. Lincoln's earliest memories were shaped here, not by comfort, but by the daily rhythm of labor. He was tall even as a boy, quiet and awkward, with large hands and a tendency to drift into thought. When Abraham was just 9 years old, his mother Nancy died. The cause was likely milk sickness, a mysterious illness caused by drinking milk from cows that had grazed on toxic plants. Her death left an ache that would echo through Lincoln's life. For years afterward, he would speak of her with a soft reverence, and her absence carved out in him a quiet depth, a solemnity uncommon in children. His father remarried a woman named Sarah Bush Johnston, who brought kindness and structure into the boy's life. She encouraged Abraham to read, and though books were rare on the frontier, the young boy devoured everything he could find. He read slowly, thoughtfully. By firelight, by candlelight, sometimes tracing lines with a finger in the dust. Aesop's fables. The Bible. Robinson Crusoe. Shakespeare. These stories settled into his bones, not as grand entertainments, but as quiet companions. As he grew, Lincoln remained a study in contrasts, physically strong, yet emotionally delicate. He worked hard, splitting rails, hauling logs, and laboring in fields. Yet always, there was that gaze, that way of drifting off mid-task, as if hearing something others could not. In New Salem, a small Illinois town where he spent his early adulthood, Lincoln tried his hand at many trades: storekeeper, postmaster, surveyor. He failed often. He went into debt. He wrestled with melancholy. And still, people liked him. They found in him a certain honesty, a natural grace despite his awkwardness. He had a self-deprecating humor, and a rare ability to listen without judgment. He began studying law, not through formal education, but by borrowing books and teaching himself. It was slow going. But Lincoln had patience. He would walk miles to attend court sessions, to observe, to learn. Eventually, he earned his license and became a lawyer. Not a wealthy one, but a respected one. In court, he was known not for fiery rhetoric, but for clarity. He told stories. He used common sense. He appealed to people's better angels. And when he failed, which he sometimes did, he did so with dignity. During these years, he also fell in love with Mary Todd, a well-educated woman from a prominent Kentucky family. Their courtship was not smooth. They quarreled. They even broke off an engagement before eventually marrying in 1842. Their life together would be one of complexity, shared love and shared grief, pride and pain. But Mary understood the greatness within her husband, and he, in turn, respected her sharp mind. Lincoln entered politics gradually, first as a state legislator, then a single term in Congress. For years, he receded again into private life, working as a lawyer. He was not, at first, a national figure. But the country was changing. Slavery, long a shadow over American life, was becoming the center of everything. Lincoln was not an abolitionist in his early years. He believed slavery was wrong, but his views, like the nation's, evolved slowly. He struggled between pragmatism and principle. But over time, as the violence over slavery escalated, so did his clarity. In 1858, his debates with Stephen Douglas brought him into national view. He spoke plainly, passionately. A house divided against itself cannot stand, he warned. It was not a threat. It was an observation, soft, steady, and unmistakable. In 1860, to the surprise of many, Lincoln was elected president. He had won not because he was the loudest voice, but because he was steady. Because he seemed like a man who could hold the nation together. But even before he took office, 7 Southern states had seceded. And so, Lincoln began his presidency not with peace, but with unraveling. The Civil War would consume nearly every moment of Lincoln's presidency. Over 4 long years, the weight of the conflict etched lines deeper into his face, turned his beard whiter, and left his eyes hollow. He visited battlefields. He read casualty reports late into the night. He wrote letters to grieving families. He debated generals, encouraged statesmen, and steered a fragile democracy through the bloodiest conflict in its history. He was not always confident, nor always correct. But he never wavered from his responsibility. When he signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, it was not just an act of law. It was a statement of moral direction. From that point forward, the war was not only about union, it was about freedom. In 1864, Lincoln was re-elected, despite the mounting cost of war. He did not celebrate. Instead, he looked inward. And by March 1865, at his second inauguration, he stood before a country drenched in blood and said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all. With firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds." It was not triumph he offered. It was healing. And now, let us return, quietly, respectfully, to that final day. It is Friday, and the sun rises over Washington in pale gold. Lincoln wakes early, as he always does. His mood is lighter than it has been in months. The war, for all practical purposes, is over. Just 5 days before, Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox. Crowds cheered in the streets. Bells rang across the city. But Lincoln remained calm. That morning, he walks with Mary in the White House gardens. They speak of travel, of rest. She suggests a trip to Europe. He smiles and says, no, he wants to see California. He meets with his cabinet for a few hours. He is thoughtful, contemplative. He speaks again of the need for reconciliation, not punishment. He shares a dream he has had. He tells them he feels strangely serene. Later in the day, he rides through the city in an open carriage with Mary. The air smells of lilacs and wet earth. The city is breathing again, cautiously, after 4 years of tight-held breath. People wave as the carriage passes. Lincoln tips his hat. Mary later says it was the happiest she'd seen him in years. As the day softens into evening, they prepare to attend the theater. Our American Cousin, a comedy. A light distraction. He does not want to go. He feels the pull of duty. But Mary insists it will do them good. They dress. They ride. The theater is crowded. Applause rings out as the president enters. People rise. He bows, modestly. In the presidential box, the chairs are upholstered in red velvet. Flags hang behind them. A portrait of George Washington watches from above. The play begins. Laughter rises and falls. And then, a single shot. And silence. Abraham Lincoln, the man of words, of patience, of lonely strength, falls forward, his head bowed as if in deep thought. He will not speak again. He is carried across the street to a boarding house. A small room. A modest bed. He lies there, barely breathing, through the night. His long frame stretched across a bed too short. His eyes closed. Around him, doctors whisper. Mary weeps. Cabinet members wait. And at 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, the quiet is complete. Now he belongs to the ages, says Secretary Stanton. And now, all these years later, we still remember. Not just because he was president, but because of the shape of his quiet strength. Because of how he bore sorrow without bitterness. Because he believed, gently, steadily, in the better parts of us all. His story does not ask for loud admiration. It asks only to be heard, slowly, thoughtfully, and perhaps, in the stillness of night, to be understood. As the quiet settles after the storm of war and loss, the world shifts into a different rhythm. The shock of Lincoln's death ripples outward, touching every corner of a nation still tender from conflict. Yet within that sorrow are whispers of mystery, culture, and the human impulse to find meaning even in the darkest nights. Let us walk softly into this realm of shadows and whispers, with patience, openness, and care. The morning after the news breaks, the streets of Washington seem hushed, as though the city itself is holding its breath. Imagine the early spring air, cool and heavy with the scent of damp stone and budding trees. Flags hang at half-mast. Windows are shuttered in respect. The usual murmur of carriages and footsteps is muted. People gather quietly around newspaper stands, reading the same solemn headlines. Some walk slowly along Pennsylvania Avenue, their heads bowed, touching their hats in silent farewell. Across the nation, the grief is just as palpable. Letters pour into the White House, telegrams hum with sorrow, and churches ring their bells in lament. The mood is one of stillness, reflection, a collective pause to honor a man who bore the nation's burden with unspoken endurance. Over the next days, Lincoln's body was transported from Washington to Springfield, Illinois, by train. The train itself moved slowly, deliberately, over thousands of miles. At each stop, crowds gathered, families, soldiers, townsfolk, standing in silence, their faces a mixture of grief and respect. Visualize those scenes, chilly mornings draped in fog, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on iron tracks, wreaths of flowers laid along the rails, the soft murmur of prayer rising in the chill air. This journey was not merely transportation. It was a shared pilgrimage, a chance for a grieving country to connect with the man who had shaped its destiny. With grief often comes a desire to find meaning beyond the facts. And so, stories began to weave around Lincoln's death, some grounded in truth, others touched by the gentle hand of myth. Consider, for example, the tale of the mysterious vigil, stories of strange figures said to have watched over Lincoln's body during the night, shadows slipping silently through the halls of the boarding house where he died. or the whispered accounts of visions seen by those close to him, visions of light, of peace, of quiet rivers flowing into distant horizons. These stories, whether fact or fancy, serve as a kind of balm, a way to soften the edges of loss, to reach beyond the silence. They remind us that history is not only the record of events but also the landscape of memory and meaning. In the years following Lincoln's death, artists, poets, and musicians sought to capture the essence of the man and his moment. Imagine the soft stroke of a painter's brush, tracing the lines of Lincoln's worn face, the deep-set eyes, the thoughtful brow, the hint of a sad smile. Picture poets crafting quiet verses, meditations on unity, grief, and hope. Music, too, took up the task, slow dirges played on somber strings, hymns rising in cathedral spaces, gentle melodies floating on evening air. These artistic expressions offered a shared space for reflection, a way for people to process the enormity of what had been lost and what might yet be regained. Perhaps the most enduring echo of Lincoln's death is the gentle insistence on healing. His words, spoken so softly during his second inauguration, linger in the air. With malice toward none, with charity for all. This was not merely a plea, it was a guiding light. Over the years, this vision of reconciliation shaped the nation's efforts to rebuild, not just in bricks and mortar, but in hearts and minds. The rhythm of healing was slow. It was uneven. But it was steady. And it began in the shadows of that April night, in the spaces between sorrow and hope. As we reflect on this segment, imagine yourself standing quietly in a softly lit room. The past folds gently around you, like a well-worn shawl. The stories, the sights, the sounds, all invite you to rest. The echoes of Lincoln's life and death ripple outward still, a calm current beneath the restless waves of history. Let us now drift slowly into the broader world that surrounded Abraham Lincoln, a world woven from the many threads of daily existence, from humble cabins to grand parlors, from quiet farms to bustling cities. Here, lives intertwined and yet diverged, creating a landscape of contrasts both gentle and stark. Imagine stepping softly into this era, hearing the murmurs and rhythms of lives lived in very different spaces, each shaped by their own patterns, hopes, and challenges. Picture, if you will, the steady pulse of rural life. The scent of fresh-cut hay, warm earth turned by wooden plows, the soft rustling of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. This was the life Lincoln knew intimately. Families rose with the dawn. The air was cool, filled with the scent of dew and the distant crow of roosters. Men headed into fields, their hands calloused, their movements deliberate and sure. Women tended gardens, cooked on wood-burning stoves, and cared for children who ran barefoot over soft grass. The day was long but measured, shaped by the seasons and the demands of the land. The farmhouse creaked gently as the wind moved through, and smoke curled softly from chimneys, carrying the faint aroma of burning wood and simmering stew. Tasks were shared and passed from one generation to the next. Children learned early the rhythms of labor, hoeing, planting, harvesting, but also the stories told beside flickering fires, stories of ancestors and hopes for the future. Though hard, this life was not without its moments of softness, the hush of a summer evening, the quiet bloom of wildflowers, the steady companionship of animals. Not far from these quiet homesteads, cities grew like slow fires in the dusk. In places like Chicago, St. Louis, and Washington, D.C., cobblestone streets echoed with the sounds of horses' hooves and carriage wheels. Smoke rose from factories and chimneys, mingling with the crispness of river air. Here, the social landscape was more tangled. Immigrants arrived by the thousands, seeking work and new lives. Markets bustled with vendors calling softly, their voices weaving a tapestry of languages and accents. The scent of fresh bread from bakeries mingled with the tang of tanned leather and the faint, persistent odor of coal smoke. Life was noisier, faster. Yet beneath the clamor were stories of families, mothers rocking infants wrapped in coarse blankets, shopkeepers arranging goods with care, young men and women navigating the complexities of city life. While wealth and poverty sat side by side, the city offered opportunities, a chance to rise, to reinvent, or simply to survive. At the uppermost rungs, we find the elite, the politicians, industrialists, and social leaders who shaped the era's directions. Imagine finely carved furniture, polished wood floors, and walls hung with rich tapestries. The air inside these homes carries the subtle scent of beeswax polish, perfumed oils, and smoldering fireplaces. In these rooms, conversations were measured and deliberate: politics, philosophy, the arts. Dinners were formal affairs, with fine china and delicate silverware arranged precisely on linen-covered tables. Women of this class moved with practiced grace, their dresses rustling softly as they crossed rooms. Men donned tailored coats, their voices low and steady, the weight of decisions pressing lightly on their shoulders. Yet even here, life was not untouched by sorrow or complexity. The Civil War's shadows loomed large, and the fragility of peace was a constant presence. Despite these differences, threads of common humanity wove through all levels of society. Whether a farmer in Illinois, a factory worker in Philadelphia, or a senator in Washington, life was shaped by the same uncertainties: weather, health, family, hope. Imagine a quiet evening in a small home where the light of a single candle flickers softly. A mother hums a lullaby. Outside, the distant sound of a church bell tolls. Across town, in a grand house, a family gathers around a piano, the soft notes filling the parlor with warmth. In the humblest and highest places, people sought comfort in routine, in small kindnesses, in the steady rhythms that tethered them to one another. As we close this segment, picture yourself standing on the edge of a quiet field at dusk. The sun slips slowly below the horizon, painting the sky in gentle hues of pink and lavender. The air cools, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. The world that Abraham Lincoln inhabited was one of contrasts: hope and hardship, light and shadow, division and unity. But it was also a world filled with the simple, enduring textures of daily life. And through it all, a quiet strength endured, the strength of people moving forward, step by steady step. And so, we return at last to the quiet stillness of night. The streets of Washington, D.C., are hushed now. The lamps burn low. The people, those of high station and those with none at all, have turned in for sleep. And somewhere, across the dark curve of the continent, a new dawn is waiting to rise. Abraham Lincoln's final night came to an end in silence. The laughter that had filled the theater stopped. The gaslights were dimmed. And a great, unspoken awareness crept across the city, that something had changed. Forever. In the days that followed, the country mourned. Some did so publicly, parading in black, hanging crepe from porches and windows. Others did so quietly, through simple prayers, lowered eyes, or a still moment at dawn. But grief, as always, gives way to memory. And memory, in time, becomes story. And now, as we lie here, more than a century and a half removed from that night, we are left not only with the facts, but with the textures. The rhythm of a city reawakening after war. The softness of spring coats brushing along muddy sidewalks. The glint of lamplight on polished boots. The quiet crinkle of a newspaper in the president's hand. And above all, the shape of a man. Tall. Lean. Quiet in manner, but vast in purpose. A man who bore the burdens of a divided nation on his shoulders. A man who laughed quietly with his wife over dinner. A man who dreamed of California and the sea. And who, on the night of April 14, 1865, Saturday beneath a golden chandelier and smiled gently as the crowd around him laughed. It is easy, in our modern world, to think of figures like Lincoln as distant, sealed in marble, caught in sepia photographs and solemn quotes. But when we slow down, when we listen quietly, we begin to feel something more human. The breath between his words. The weight of his coat on tired shoulders. The way his eyes softened when his youngest son entered the room. And in that stillness, he becomes real again. Not just a monument, but a man. Tonight, as you rest, as your mind drifts further into calm, remember that history is not only what happened. It is also how it felt. The rhythm of daily life. The weight of ordinary choices. The way laughter filled a theater, even on the edge of loss. Lincoln's night is long past now. The gaslights are gone. The horses no longer echo down those avenues. But the memory remains, quiet, steady, and ever unfolding. And you, too, are part of that long, unfolding story. By listening, by remembering, you carry forward the softer threads of the past. The ones woven not from speeches or battles, but from stillness. So rest now. Let the past fade gently into the background. Let the city of Washington grow distant. Let the footfalls of history become quieter. Until all that remains is breath and calm. Sleep well. You are safe. You are held in the quiet arms of time. And tomorrow will come. Just as it always has. Good night.